Hello everyone, welcome back to Morgan Hasn't Seen for another Living Dead movie in our October Spooky Season series, Jeannine, and a literal Living Dead movie this week as well, although whether it actually falls into Romero's canon of Living Dead movies or not has prompted decades worth of arguments, I fear, through fans and the producers themselves, I suppose, as well. Because we're talking the return of the Living Dead today. It does not strictly follow Romero's Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead. I think is there another one as well? Is it Diary of the Dead?
I think he did like he even did like a really later one where he had Simon Pegg actually like be in it, like as a fun kind of full circle, but I don't remember what it's called. So he did another kind of later one, I think in the 2000s before.
So this is the step sibling of the Living Dead movies, I suppose, isn't it? Or the cousin of the Living Dead.
Yes. I mean, they found a really fun way to kind of include it into the universe because the movie exists in the world of this film, but as a kind of retelling of something that actually really happened in the world of this film. So we end up kind of knowing the existence of that film as kind of a change of an actual event. So I always thought that was kind of like a fun concept. So when they try to kind of kill the zombies in the same way as the film, it's wrong because they kind of established that the film kind of changed things from the real event that actually happened. So I mean, you find this kind of roundabout fun way to include it and connect it.
They do. I mean, you open this movie with the kind of log line of this is a true story. You know, the events are real, the places are real, the characters are real, and nothing. You know full well nothing can be further from the truth because know. I think we knew going into this movie. This obviously wasn't a movie I'd ever seen before. That's the point of Morgan Hasn't Seen here, obviously, as we're talking our zombie movies throughout October. But had you ever seen this movie before either? And if you hadn't, I'm also convinced you were aware that it was at least a silly movie.
Yes, I was kind of aware of it. I only ended up watching it, I think maybe like 2 years ago because I was doing this series on my TikTok where I was trying to find horror themed movies to watch during every season of the year for every month.
Okay.
And so when I was looking for 4th of July horror, this movie came up because it's set the 4th of July weekend. So like I think the events start on July 3rd going into July 4th. So I would watch the movies if I hadn't seen them so that I could include them in this kind of, review series of, hey, here are these movies you can watch for June and July and August or whatever. So when I got to 4th of July, this movie came up and I watched it for that. And I was like, wow, this is a really kind of fun way to connect it to the original. I was also aware of the trash character because Dead Meat does this kind of Royal Rumble simulation of the Royal Rumble game, but they kind of make their own horror characters and have them battle it out. And they had the trash character in there. So I was kind of aware of her. So when she did come up, I was like, oh, that's okay. That's what she's from. So I did end up watching it for the first time a couple years ago. And so I think this is kind of the movie that I wanted to kind of craft the series around because I thought it was a really fun one.
I mean, it makes sense. I do think it's the most significant of all the movies we're talking, really. And there's been some other big name zombie movies, obviously, that we've covered in this series. And even next week, we're ending with 28 Years Later, which was a massive deal, obviously, this year. Not just for zombie movies or horror movies, but movies in general. It was very, very widely talked about. But there is something particularly special, I think, about the Return of the Living Dead. Being this half sequel to Night of the Living Dead, but also in its own world, more of a sequel to the quote unquote real life events that occurred during Night of the or that prompted the filming of Night of the Living Dead.
Exactly. That was the purpose of them making the movie. That inspired the movie, The Night of the Living Dead.
Which is a wild way of
kind of connecting it.
Reinventing and
Exactly.
connecting.
Because I think the point was they wanted to do something more connected, but then they ultimately came up with their own idea. And this
It's probably
idea
a rights
also
issue as well. It's probably Romero going, "No,
exactly.
you're not doing that."
Well, yeah, there was, as you kind of mentioned, there was a little bit of kind of pushback and even a kind of a lawsuit that came about because this movie ended up being released. They had no plans to release it around the same time as Dawn of the Dead, but it ended up coming out around the same time and ended up actually making more money than Dawn of the Dead.
Was it Dawn of the Dead or Day of the Dead?
Day of the Dead. Day of the Dead.
Mid-80s.
Yes, and they ended up coming out around the same time, but this one ended up making more money because it just had a stronger promotional campaign leaning into kind of the young punk scene. Because this movie is ending up having your characters be punks. As the director, he said, yes,
group of
because
protagonists for the movie.
Yes, and because the director, he had said, you know, he was tired of seeing punks kind of be betrayed as like bad guys and villainous in films. So he wanted to make these like, you know, good punks because he actually knew people of this kind of community in his life and knew them to be some of the nicest people he knew. So he wanted to kind of crush the stereotype with that. And obviously that would lean into the culture and be popular amongst kind of younger people in this era. So I thought that was kind of a fun thing on it. Also, this film just gives us it builds on the zombie lore. Like we get brains from this movie. That ends up being kind of a stable thing for the zombie figure because of this film. And I love that, you know, the whole scene when they're kind of asking that zombie body questions to understand. And I loved all of that kind of learning about them and them being smart enough to like trick the cops and lure more humans to them so they can get the brains. And the brains help kind of ease the pain of dying, ease the pain of their bodies rotting. So it has a whole meaning behind it. They're not meaning to be these evil things killing people, but it's just to satiate and take away the pain that they feel from their bodies decomposing. So adding like this really kind of logical almost component to it and kind of humanizing this creature that, you know, it's the most human creature because it's just a dead person. So to add this really interesting human layer to them and make them talk and understand was such a kind of cool thing to see in this really mostly silly movie. So I love that kind of thoughtful layer to it.
I completely agree. I think aside from it being a very funny, really wild, gory, entertaining nonsense kind of movie, why is there a bunch of surprising kind of effective zombie mythology going on here? Like way more so than we've seen in the other movies so far. And I think we've reiterated time and time again, typically the better parts of any zombie movie are when any such zombie feels most humanized, whether it's somebody we have developed as a character who turns, whether quickly or slowly, and they're often the most effective kind of scenes. You get that in Return of the Living Dead as well. You get the very, very developed, somewhat central characters actively, very slowly turning into zombies themselves and then going through the whole process of this slow undeath almost, and
Yeah,
it's
because
very,
of, like,
very
this chemical that's
yeah,
affecting them and making it this chemical thing that's turning them, and the fact that, like, there's a little bit of science behind it. The chemical, the burning of it is going into the smoke that then is going into the rain that is then now infecting the dead bodies
yeah.
that are there and reanimating them. So, just kind of how they laid out how everything works feels so logical. In such a kind of, monster movie to have to apply logic to something that is kind of, humanly
Yeah,
implausible to this fantasy horror story. It grounds it in a really fun way.
it does, but I think that's all down to it being obviously based around the Living Dead style of
Yeah.
zombie. It's
Hmm.
which ultimately began as radiation, didn't it?
Yeah.
So it was all that the chemical that is a part of this movie has come from what that original Night of the Living Dead real world event produced, and all the like the zombies from that have been contained in these
Yes,
sort of
and yeah,
metal containers, of which get released, of which the chemical gets released, of which
exactly.
begins the
The
zombie
process of the
execution.
reanimations. Yeah, so to get into the story, we start with these two kind of yokels. Like, basically, this young kid
Yeah,
who's
that's a
sort
good it's a good way of putting it. Yokels,
yes.
I think. We
Yeah,
we are in Kentucky
basically
as well, so it's a good way.
yes, exactly. So, like, basically, this whole process starts because an older guy is trying to impress his young coworker, and that's how we get into the situation.
Which is a
So,
little
we
bit
have
weird to begin with, because this Freddie, who's the young one of the punks who's got this job in this warehouse
yeah,
now. It feels a little bit odd as to why Frank would be so concerned with trying to
trying to impress
impress
him.
uh
Yes.
Freddie. I think it's a bit cute, to be fair,
Right?
but
Yes, I mean,
I
I'm
don't see
I'm, like,
why
the
he's
older
doing it
person.
in the first place. I don't understand the character dynamics and the relationships of these
I'm
two.
wanting
Why is he
to, like
so bothered?
yeah, I don't know, he's just, like, eager to impress him, because, like, 'cause it seems like he probably works there alone all the time, he doesn't have
I
anyone to
mean,
talk to, so now he has this impressionable kid who seems excited about, like, this cool stuff that he can teach him, and so he gets really excited to have someone to talk to about it. So Frank, the older guy who's training Freddie, the young kid, who is the guy who ends up a few years later going on to play Tommy Jarvis in Jason Lives. I think that's part
that's
6 of the
right.
Friday the
Yes,
13th.
he's in a
Um,
Friday.
yes. So he's training him at this medical supply warehouse. How to, like, pack up the skeletons and all these different things and the cadavers that they would send off to, like, medical schools and all these things. So he's showing him around, and
And there's a
then
certain dark fascination as well with this
yeah,
from the punk side of things. I think some of the punks, namely Trash, who we've mentioned briefly already,
yeah,
seem a little bit more death obsessed than some of the others. But there
exactly.
is an
A morbid
overpowering sense
curiosity.
of a morbid curiosity is a good
Yeah,
way of putting it. There is a sort of fascination with death
yeah.
that comes from all of them to an extent.
Exactly. So Freddie is part of this punk group. So he's gone and got this job. And so his punk friends are like, "Hey, what's Freddie doing tonight?" And his girlfriend who's in the group says, "Oh, he just got this new job at the medical warehouse." And they're like, "Well, let's wait, and hang out at the cemetery across the street, and then we can pick him up when he's done with his shift and we can all hang out." So
How
yeah, morbid
convenient there is a cemetery across the
of
street,
course,
and a
right?
medical warehouse, and a mortuary
And a
as well. It's not like they
mortuary in the little
just
complex.
confined themselves in this
All
perfect
in this little
zombie
cul-de-sac
world.
corner. Exactly. So they're hanging out in the cemetery while Freddy's working this job. And so Freddy gets kind of excited and asks Frank, "Hey, what's the kind of strangest thing you've seen?" And so Frank gets really excited to tell him. He tells him, oh, well, the army was working on this chemical that could kind of reanimate bodies. Or it was for something else, but they ended up learning that it could reanimate bodies. And they ended up using it, and it was this whole kind of medical mistake. And so they tried to hide it, and the bodies that came to life, they contained them in these jars, in these big kind of crates or whatever. And then, word got out that this happened, and that's where the Night of the Living Dead movie came from, but they changed some of the story around.
Yes.
So he lets him know that this is something that really happened, and then they made a movie about it, but they changed a lot of the details so nobody would get in trouble. So then years later, there was some kind of mess up with the delivery of these containers that held the bodies. Instead of sending them to the army place, they ended up sending them here. And we didn't know what to do with them. So we just put them in the basement of our warehouse. So we have these bodies here. Do you want to go check them out? Kind of
now
thing.
let's take a moment.
That's where we start.
It is where we start. It's where we open. It's what causes all the chaos. Because obviously they decide to go down there and accidentally open up one of the cases, leading to the
so Frankie opens the lid, and you can see
invasion.
So Frank opens the lid of one of them, and you can see, like, through this little glass window, the dead body in there. And then Freddy's like, oh, is it gonna open? Like, should we, not touch it? And he's like, oh no, these things are army made, they're sturdy. And he bangs it, and then all the gas starts seeping out and blasts both of them. They're on the floor coughing, and then we get into our opening credits. So we know, something's gonna happen. They've been blasted with this stuff.
Please, though, can we just take a moment to talk about the level of idiocy going on?
Right? Exactly.
Not only from Frank, who the instant any chaos starts happening, immediately starts cowering in a corner, crying, screaming, and throwing things around, and really just becomes a very weak-willed person for being to show off to begin the movie.
Exactly, right? And now you're just like, maybe I should call the boss. So he calls the boss, the guy who owns the warehouse, to tell him what's gone on, what they've done. And Freddy and Frankie start kind of feeling really sick. They start to feel really weird, and they don't feel good. And then they start to notice a lot of the things in the medical warehouse that were dead start coming to life. So we have, like, some little butterflies that start coming alive. We have, like, half dogs that they use in veterinary hospitals or veterinary schools, and those start coming to life. The cadaver that's in the freezer, it comes to life because the gas has been released, and it's starting to reanimate all the dead things in the warehouse.
Yes. How very exciting of this to start happening. I also simply have to bring up the idiocy of the delivery service delivering these dead bodies to this random rundown facility in Kentucky, as opposed to the literal military, as though they wouldn't know the difference. And the military wouldn't go, wait, we were due this delivery of very important thing. We haven't received it. Can we look into that? No, we'll just leave it for literally years and years and years.
And never figure out, like, what happened to this.
Never worry about it.
This toxic thing. We do also cut to this, like, army general who's, like, all set up to have some kind of nuclear strike in the case that something like this happens, because there are numbers to call on these containers with these bodies, to call this number if something gets out or out of hand or whatever. But the guy who owns the warehouse, he doesn't want to have all kinds of trouble or get sued or anything like that, because dumb Frank screwed him over. So he's like, okay, how do we contain this thing? How do we just stop it?
He's just
They
bothered
end up
about
letting
himself going to prison.
exactly, because
The boss.
yeah, Bert. So they decide, okay, well, the only thing that's really kind of being affected by this is the cadaver that's banging on the freezer now to get out because it's been reanimated. So they let it out and they figure, well, this is just like the movie. And they're not realizing that the thing downstairs has also gotten out of its container either.
Yeah.
So they are just
And
worried
the
about this
thing
cadaver.
downstairs as well, the thing downstairs is probably the most famous image of the
Oh
movie.
yeah, it's like slimy and melting and disgusting, which we don't
It's the
even
one
see it for a
it's the
while.
one that you will see the image of it going brains.
Yes, yes,
If
in
you've
the
seen that
previews and
clip,
any
is that
yes, exactly, which in the end of this movie's credits, it ends up just kind of showing a little highlight reel of, like, moments from the movie, which includes that. So,
it's a good
um
moment.
right? So then they let the cadaver out and they figure we'll just kill the cadaver. It's just should just be like the movie Night of the Living Dead. When they
Yeah.
killed the brain, when they hit him in the head, they died. So we'll just do that and then we'll just get rid of the body. So they let it out. It attacks Bert. They have to tackle it down. They end up taking this like pickaxe thing and hit it through the head but it doesn't die. It's still moving. So then Freddy's like, "Oh, maybe the movie lied. Is that something they changed in the movie? Because we established that this movie had to change some of the details. So the brains thing must have been something made up for the film because these things don't die when you kill the brain." So Bert remembers his friend who has the morgue place like right in the same
Yeah.
little area, and he
Who's a
should have
weird
a
man.
yes, who has a cremation machine so he can cremate the body and no one will be the wiser. And so
Which
I
is
was
fine.
watching a
Burning zombies is also a perfectly viable option. We've seen that over the course of
yes,
this series as well. It's not just
exactly.
about killing the brain. Burning them also
Burning the
works.
bodies also is kind of a traditional zombie thing. And so every time I watch a horror movie, I do like to watch the dead meat kill count afterwards because you get the fun
Yeah.
information and it's just kind of a nice like companion to watching a horror film. So that's kind of my routine. So after I watched this film, I rewatched the Return of the Living Dead kill count, which gave a bunch of fun information. And one of those things was that yes, the character who is the Moore guy, they weirdly insinuated with like things in the background and things he says, kind of making the character like a Nazi sympathizer, like
For no
for
reason at
no
all.
reason, no reason at all. Yeah. So
Like, he's
just
not even a bad guy. He's like,
no.
he actively helps the situation. He's just weirdly a little bit low key, has posters of Nazis up. And
Yes.
like, not
And
like obviously,
yeah.
not
No, it's just
outwardly
pinned on his
necessarily.
board in the background. He says some weird kind of like German phrase. His name is similar to like a well-known like Nazi leader. Like
It doesn't make sense as to
yeah.
why
So
all this is
yeah, and then the
included.
fact that he, runs, has a place and he's like in charge of manning this oven, like just all of these things just
Really
why?
unnecessarily
Why were these
dark.
choices made for this character? Because you like him because, like you said, he's very active in helping the situation, helping figure things out, trying to help all the people. But for whatever reason, like all these
Well,
weird
whatever they were
things.
going for there, I don't necessarily overly think it works because he doesn't necessarily. If they wanted to go there with it, you're not fitting that with the rest of the tone of this movie at all, are you?
No,
That's way
exactly.
too dark for the rest of the tone of this
Exactly,
movie.
because this movie is so kind of kooky. So as this stuff is going on, they end up chopping the body up in pieces, putting them in bags, and taking him to the guy. And they ask him, "Hey, like, it's just dead animals, yeah." And he's like, "Well, I
Yeah,
gotta see what's in there. I don't want to like, kill these animals because the bags are moving." So he's like, "They can't be dead." So then they have to explain to him what's going on, and he's like, "Okay." So they put the body in there, they burn it, but the chemicals from the body seep into the air, the smoke, and then it starts to rain, and so then that contaminated smoke mixes with the rain, pours down on the graveyard, and and it's like burning. So like all the punks who are hanging out in the graveyard, while all this is happening, the punks are just having a little party in the graveyard, playing music. Trash is talking about
great music in this movie. It has to be said. It has got a pretty impressive kind of hard punk soundtrack that I very much felt the vibe of the whole movie.
It's really good. And so as you said, Trash kind of being the biggest one obsessed with death. So she's talking about like the thought of dying or being killed just gets her so hot. So she starts stripping off all her clothes.
Being killed violently. Have you ever thought about all the ways you could be violently killed? What would your favorite way of being violently killed
and
be?
everyone's just like
stupid conversation to have.
So that's getting her all hot and bothered, and she starts stripping off her clothes, and they're like, Trash is getting naked again. So we're led to believe this is just regular. This is just usual for her. And this actress, she's the one you go to when you want to have like a naked person in your movie.
This is the mid-80s and silly horror comedy. You're going to have some level of nudity. I think the problem with this movie's nudity is the fact that it's not actually nudity.
Yes, it was a whole weird thing with her character. Like, obviously, she's an actress who had no problem. Like, she's, I think, the actress who gets killed in Silent Night, Deadly Night by the Antlers. Yes. And among other horror movies where she has been nude. So, like, she had no problem with it. So they were, like, gonna have her be fully nude. She's, like, dancing on top of a grave, like, all to the music,
like a
tomb, and everyone's like having a good time. But when she is fully naked, like you see her from behind, she's fully naked, and then you see her from the front, and she ends up looking kind of like a Barbie doll. And so I was like,
let's just say something's missing.
Yes. So I'm like, am I seeing that right? Like, is she just shaved or what? So then when I did watch that Dead Meat Kill Count, they explained that they didn't want any hair showing, so they had her shave. So she shaved, but then that showed everything, and they thought that was worse. So then they, instead of just having her wear underwear, they decided to like make a little like Barbie covering to just cover that area. So she ends up looking like a doll down there. And so she's like, they had to like take a mold. They poured this like stuff down my underwear and like, and craft this
really
cover.
Strange.
Yeah, it's
I've never quite heard of anything quite like that happen in a movie. And you certainly wouldn't expect it in a mid-80s
it's like just go
horror
for
movie.
Exactly.
Would absolutely all the time always
just show everything.
Show everything it wanted to show. It's almost the point of some of these movies to do
that. Exactly. I mean, if it was that so much like you wanted to show the top, just have her wear underwear. I don't know why they had to go through all these weird steps. So yeah,
it doesn't
very
make sense.
strange.
And it doesn't make sense why you would feel so bad about showing like pubic hair, a full bush.
Exactly.
If you have watched enough of these movies, how many bushes have you seen?
Exactly. Exactly. And why would you think shaving it would be better? Because you're just seeing everything. So yeah, very weird decision on their part. But ultimately,
but the guy obviously who is the voodoo guy in Scooby-Doo. He's one of the punks, isn't he?
Yes, he is. This
he
was
looks
like one
Rick
of his
James.
first. Yes, and then he would also go on to be in a Friday the 13th movie. He's the one pooping, having the little pooping song with his girlfriend Anita in the porta potty. He's like, oh my god, those enchiladas, and he like runs to the porta potty and he's singing a little duet with his girlfriend. Ooh, baby, ooh, baby.
Yes.
Like, yes.
Yes.
So he talked about like this being like a big role for him, like his first big role, because he was homeless during, at the time. And nobody knew. So this was kind of his big break. And then he would go on to be kind of known. He appeared in that horror noir documentary kind of talking about Black people in horror
Yeah.
movies. So so this was kind of a big role for him, and he's great in the film. He's one of the kind of punks that gets a little bit more to do. So yeah,
No,
they're
he is
partying.
definitely a big part of the movie. I do. Is he
Yeah.
Miguel
Nunez
Nunez?
Jr., I
Something like
think.
that? Yeah.
Miguel Nunez Jr., I think. So they're all partying in the cemetery, and Trash getting naked, and then the rain starts and it's starting to burn all of them. So they're run out of the rain, they get in the car, they're feeling like their skin is burning. Trash, like obviously the most burning because she's totally
Yes.
naked. So they're like, well, let's go find Freddie and see what's going on because we can't be out here anymore. So all of that is happening while they're trying to figure out what's going on with these bodies. Um, and yeah, as the punks are like trying to get away, the bodies start coming to life in the cemetery.
Yes.
They start popping out of
Music
their
cue.
graves. Yes. Um, and Trash ends up kind of getting left behind at a certain point and gets surrounded and by all the zombies. So then we end up getting to see a naked Trash zombie
We
later in the
do.
film. Attack
Yes.
some people. But I mean, makeup wise and stuff like that, how did you think the zombies looked? Because that was also kind of an issue on this film. The original makeup artist ended up getting fired because his work just was not up to par, and they ended up bringing in another guy. But there were also kind of things going on with the director constantly changing his mind about what he wanted and changing
Yeah.
things, midway through.
He was
And
a
and so
first-time director, wasn't he? It's
yeah,
Dan O'Bannon. He wrote
yeah,
Alien.
yeah,
First-time director.
yeah,
And look, I think ends up making a great movie in
yeah.
Return of the Living Dead. Definitely. Effects-wise, I think there is a lot of great effects in the
Hmm.
movie. There's also a couple of just I can't understand how that is in the same movie as some of these others. Like the half and
Yeah,
half dogs
yeah.
don't look great. The
No, or the
first
yellow cadaver. He looks like a
the
Homer
yellow
Simpson
guy.
running. Yeah,
Yeah. The first body who was the one banging on the door to be let out
yeah.
originally and is the
Hmm.
first one to be cut up and taken over to
Yeah,
Ernie the mortuary guy.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that doesn't look great. But
No.
all of the resurrected zombies look
Yeah.
incredible.
Like the one they have on the table that they're asking the questions to kind of figure out
Right?
why do you eat these brains? Like that looks great. How it's kind of it's like half a torso, skeleton,
Yeah.
and and its spine is just kind of like wiggling around and stuff,
And
and it's
the
talking.
brain zombie from the basement who was in the
Yeah,
can
just melting,
looks
oozy.
phenomenal.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, there were issues with the makeup guy ultimately getting fired, and a new guy coming in. So I think despite kind of having a miscommunication with all of that and having to kind of switch things, I think a lot of it looks really great.
Yeah, it really does. I was pleased as that. I mean, I was expecting it to look decent.
Yeah.
Because I think if this movie didn't have reasonably decent effects work going on, it wouldn't be as well thought of as I know it
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah.
And given that it is, I was going in expecting these are gonna look pretty good practical effects.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of pretty squeamish gore in the movie as well. Just like
Mhm.
oozing
Biting
brains
people.
all the
Yes, and
time,
biting
biting
people's
heads and
heads.
things.
Yeah. Yes.
It's
Yeah.
maybe don't watch it while you're eating. It's
Yeah.
kind of one of those things. It
It's pretty
would put
gross.
you
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. Um, but Freddie and Frank, they start getting sicker. And so there's some concern. So ultimately, the medics are called to check on them. And they're checking their pulse and checking their heartbeat, and it seems like they're dead because they're not getting any
Yeah.
signs of life, but they're still alive. So they really don't
They're
know
alive,
what's
they're
going on.
speaking, they're conscious,
Yes, but
they
they're
just
getting
look a bit
sicker.
blue.
Yes, they're looking sicker and sicker by the minute, like, they're dead, and, like, I love kinda getting to see this deterioration process.
Yeah.
Um,
No, this is
what
what you were
because
saying before, the focus on
yeah,
these particular zombies being so in pain all the
yeah,
time. Like, the zombies themselves are in pain. That's why they are doing what they're doing. That's why they're going after the brains. The brains are nutrition for them, so they don't feel physical pain. You never really get that a lot of the time from
yeah,
zombies. That's more of, or it feels a bit more like a vampire trope, doesn't it? Where the
mhm,
blood is what is the nutrients we need for survival, for living. Otherwise,
yeah,
we will crumble and die and
exactly,
turn into
yeah,
the skeletal, horrible, pained remains if we don't drink and become invigorated. And that is the same
exactly.
principle here.
Yeah, like vampires I think are kind of similar in the fact that like to zombies in the world of monster movies that their lore can kind of be added to or things taken away or do different kind of things
Yeah,
with it. Like, you
very
bring up the
malleable.
blood. Yes, like if you watch Twilight, new vampires are the strongest because they still have their human blood kind of living in their tissues, and things like that. So I loved kind of what they added to that and seeing what this chemical does. So, we see what it does to a dead body. And we also are getting to see what it does to a living body, as these two were living men who got blasted head on with this stuff. So it's interesting to see how it affects them and how they end up deteriorating into a zombie from a living state. Like it's as good as, you know,
Yeah,
being bitten by a zombie, having
yeah.
been blasted by this chemical. Um, so
And
so I
I
love kind of
genuinely can't quite remember a transformation seeming so slow and painful either. Like,
yeah.
I think of the one in Dawn of the Dead. There's a pretty slow character
Mhm,
transformation or zombification of a character in
yeah.
Dawn of the Dead. But it doesn't feel quite as painful for them as it does for Frank and Freddy in this movie. Like, they are screaming in pain at a certain point.
Yes, and yeah, and they're starting to their bodies are dying, like, they're starting to, like, get rigor mortis and get stiff, and they
Yeah.
can't move, and the bruising, and all kinds of crazy stuff
Blood
happening to their
pooling everywhere and
yes, because their bodies are completely shutting down. So it's an interesting kind of shift on kind of what we normally see when somebody gets bitten and they're kind of trying to just go on and then they start getting beads of sweat and that kind of thing.
yeah,
Or even in World War Z that we saw, an instant kind of quick uh
exactly.
change. So again, I think zombies are comparable to vampires in terms of monster movies where there's really kind of interesting there can be a lot of interesting shifts with the lore and the rules behind them. So the fact that this is a chemical zombie, they're able to do some kind of interesting things with how it works. So that's what
I just
I
think
love about this movie.
it's so rare that you get a sympathetic zombie,
Yes, the
and
one that's on the table, and she's just like, "We're just in so much pain. That's why we need the brains. It soothes our pain. It takes our pain away." And you feel like, wow, like it's not just this mindless
yeah. It's
eating.
the
There's a
one thing I hate about some zombies is that they just faceless, mindless hordes of mass body,
yeah, exactly.
essentially.
But the fact that these have a purpose and they're just doing it to stop their pain, and, like, they have the capacity to, like, get on the get on the comm and say, "Send more paramedics, send more police," so that they can
Yeah,
have more people to eat. They even have a zombie dressed as a cop, like, who was one of the cops, like, waving, like, pretending to be a living cop to
they
lure all
are
the
clever.
cops in, and then as they get all the cops to come, they attack them all to
Yeah,
get their brains. I
hundreds of
love
them.
yeah. So I love them kind of working together and being kind of smart to figure this stuff out, and that there's a purpose behind what they're doing as opposed to it just being this mindless pun intended, I guess, endeavor for them, or they're kind of just this lost soul. There's, they're still something working in there that is making them do this and need to do this.
It just makes it feel fresh, doesn't it? It makes it feel
Mhm.
like actually something different. You will remember this movie aside from so many other zombie movies you're going to watch in your life. You'll take real note of this one for how it treats its zombies, for its fun, for its kind of punkish attitude, which does display itself across the whole movie as well. It's not just from the punks themselves and within the soundtrack. I think everything about this movie is pretty defiant. And behind the scenes as well, it's fairly defiant because you're going up against Romero, who at this time had made
the kind of
two
definitive
great zombie movies.
Yes,
Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. Whatever you think of zombies before Romero, he obviously completely changed
that whole thing. And now this movie,
concept of zombies,
and then this movie would come and change it again. And so I do appreciate this film purposely wanting to differentiate itself. They knew about Romero. There were thoughts to kind of do something similar to him, but then they ultimately were like, no, we want to change it up purposely. We want to do our own thing with it, but still connect it to Romero in that way, but completely change the lore. And their lore that they did in this film ultimately would be kind of an iconic thing about the character, about that monster, which I love. So then kind of our stories end up coming together as the punks end up kind of coming together with the with our warehouse people, as the girlfriend of Freddy kind of wants to see him, and she sees he's sick and she doesn't know what's happening. But ultimately, they kind of are putting the pieces together as they're starting to see that, the living dead is starting to bust in to the mortuary and try to get at them. And this is where we get all of our kind of like human action of having to barricade and work together and fight them off and figure out how they're going to get out of this, which is always kind of the funnest part of these movies, seeing these kind of team ups. And you talk about the punk characters,
this is a bit hordes of zombies,
coming at them.
The constant flow.
Yes. And so, with the punk characters, they do kind of establish and give them personalities, which I appreciated, like kind of the lead punk. There's a whole scene of them when they're partying in the cemetery about him just lamenting, do you think this is a costume? I have thoughts and I have things I want to say and I have things I care about, and, him kind of having this existential crisis. So I like that they kind of give them a little bit of personality. So when our whole crew is together, we can kind of distinguish them and care about them a little bit. When they're going
enough of them at least. Probably about four of them characters,
and then some get killed. Like that main one, he ultimately ends up getting killed because he kind of jumps in to save the people from the gross one that's in the basement. And so we end up kind of losing a few of them, but we get kind of our big zombie action scenes of fighting them off. And then there's this whole conversation about Frank and Freddy. We need to kind of separate them because clearly, there's something wrong with them, but the girlfriend, she wants to stay with Freddy. So she ends up being locked in there with him too. He ultimately ends up dying and tries to eat her and come after her. So then she ultimately gets saved by Ernie, the mortuary guy, and the other guys. And so now it's kind of like this big fight off to like try to get out while also trying to barricade the place and figure out what they're going to do, because now the whole little area is completely overrun. So it becomes this kind of big chase to like, what are we going to do? Because I think who's left, the warehouse owner, Ernie, the mortuary guy, Miguel Nunez Jr., the girlfriend, and I think that's, and then like
genuinely might be it.
And then there's two other punks, like a girl punk and a guy punk, and like the preppy kind of punk,
the guy in the suit.
Like, yes, and like everyone's kind of like, nobody likes you kind of thing with this guy. there's a part where the warehouse guy, Carl, right? That's his name. Carl and Miguel Nunez Jr., they're able to get out, but then they end up getting overrun. They get out to a cop car, and then they end up getting overrun, and they have to go back inside. So yeah, everything kind of just builds up and builds up to the point where they're kind of all
it gets crazy. It gets
Yeah.
crazy. The zombies keep coming. There is a serious just build of constant zombies that just increase in number and increase in number and increase in number. It all stems from obviously this chemical outpouring, the rain coming down,
the rain
widening and widening and widening, and it's only gonna get bigger.
Yeah, the zombies are calling more people to the scene and then eating them.
Keep coming and keep coming and keep coming because they're clever, these zombies. They're very, very intelligent. And we actually kind of like the way they think and the way they work and what they're doing here. But unless there's serious action taken, this is going to end up in a total invasion.
Exactly. So we do also, when Freddy, he ends up changing, he is full on zombie going after his girlfriend and everybody else. But Frank has a different response to his change. So how did you feel about Frank's kind of noble kind of ending that he takes? Because he ultimately ends up walking to the cremation oven.
Yes,
he ends up walking to the cremation oven. He takes off his wedding ring. He kisses it. He hangs it up on the side and pushes himself into the oven and burns himself.
I think, again, I actually think it's something you don't necessarily see that often in zombie movies, the self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
You often get usually because the change is too quick for that to happen. Or if the change is slow, the mind is kind of the first thing to go, and you just kind of lied there in unconscious or semi-unconscious state, and you just are being watched by the others deteriorate, essentially.
Yes, I mean, you think of something like You think of something like Train to Busan. You think of something like Train to Busan when the father, in that, he started to have that change, and he's using his last few moments to kind of talk to, his daughter and all of that kind of thing. And even when he calls his mom and she's starting to change, she's still able to kind of communicate with him a little bit before she changes. So
but that gives it just enough time to do something like that. He couldn't have done anything else. That's not really a self-sacrifice. That's just one last noble act, essentially, or one last good deed, I suppose, in that movie, which is
even Night of the Creeps. Yeah. Well, even like that lovely kind of moment we loved and gushed about in Night of the Creeps, where the best friend, I think Mikey, his name, he has that last little bits of coherence to leave that message for his friend of what to do and what is happening, and celebrate the fact that despite this thing inside of him, he's able to walk for the first time and all of this kind of thing. So I kind of saw that this moment with Frank akin to that, where he is a fully kind of a zombie, but he's like, I would rather not partake in the brains and this pain I'm dealing with. I'm just going to put myself out of my misery. So he kisses his wedding ring. He gets down on his knees and prays for forgiveness, and then pushes himself into the oven. So I kind of, again, just this layer to the ability of these things to kind of have this coherence and thought process. And so for Frank to kind of do that, especially because he's kind of the one who caused it,
that's what I mean.
For him to kind of have this kind of sweet, coherent moment to just, end things on his own terms.
That's why it feels significant, I suppose, for Frank to do that. And that's what I'm saying. Yes, it's similar to that one from Night of the Creeps, but it goes even further. Because the one in Night of the Creeps is still just one last speech. He doesn't
we don't get to see it.
Do anything. He doesn't sacrifice, quote unquote, himself. He doesn't take that time, because there isn't enough time. This is what I'm saying. This, the zombification of Frank and Freddy in this movie takes so long that they're even separate characters as zombies than they are as people. Because it takes that length of time for them to actually get there.
And there's a realization of what's happening to them over this course of time.
A full realization of what's happening to them. So for Frank to do this means it meant more. I enjoyed that sacrifice because I've not seen something in a movie like this, in a zombie movie of that scale before. There's plenty of final noble acts. There's plenty of stay back, I'm going to hold them off and sacrifice myself while I'm still a human, but not while you're a zombie. When you're a zombie, you're just a zombie 99% of the time. No matter if you are like half recognizing that, oh, you're a loved one, so I'm not going to go after you, but by the time I've realized that, you've run away and the movie's moved on. You know, this is very focused on. I mean, it is true sacrifice from Frank, and I would not have expected this from him over the course of the rest of the movie when he showed himself to be nothing but cowardly. And this is the most noblest of sacrifices in this, you know, towards the end of this movie from him, and I appreciated that. I did, because it's not easy to do, but you have to remember he is a zombie at this point. He is not human at this point. This is him in his zombie mind, in his zombie brain, going, it's actually better to do away with myself rather than carry on. Which you don't get that. You never, ever get that. As soon as you're in zombie brain, you turn into what
you're done, you're gone. Yes. So I like that there's still this kind of thought there. That's such a smart layer to this film that differentiates it from other zombie films for sure. Especially because we've watched a couple now. So kind of taking that comparative look, it's a really interesting thing and it stands out a lot more. We ultimately end up seeing our last few survivors in the basement. And at this point, Carl's like, okay, there's nothing left to do but call the number on the side of the barrel. So he ends up calling the number. The army guy who we kind of alluded to earlier on in the beginning of the film knows just what to do. He calls in this strike. And so, you know, they're thinking, oh, what are they going to do to save us? You know, we're here. We're a couple survivors. Can you send help?
Send some helicopters.
Something. And the guy is like, oh, yeah, we know just what to do. We're prepared for this. And then he doesn't tell Carl what they're going to do. He just says, we're prepared for this.
No.
And then we see him
you just get the sound, don't you? You just get...
Yes. And Carl's like, did you hear that? Do you hear something? And we see the guy calling this missile strike. We see a big tank shoot this missile. And we just see our survivors. And Carl's like, what? Do you hear that? And we just hear the whistle. And then we see them kind of blow up the whole place. But so we're thinking, okay, it's contained. It's all good. No, because then ultimately we get word that, you know, now it's just blown up the chemical even more. It's raining again. So the smoke of the explosion mixing with the chemical that they just blew up in these creatures is now going back up into the air, raining back down again. And
the final bit of idiocy in a movie full of idiocy, like I said before, Jeannine, was this general or whoever he is realizing or not realizing blowing up the you know it's a chemical. You actively know it's a chemical. So you think you don't want to go in there, remove the chemical somehow and then carry on and you know, cut it out that way.
Exactly.
You're actually just gonna destroy all the zombies themselves that are currently there, but exacerbate the problem by actively making the chemical more destructive.
Yes, and they're thinking the rain is gonna wash it away. So we hear him in like
and
a
you
radio
don't realize you're
voiceover.
gonna do that.
Yeah, so we
You're
hear him on
telling me
this
you don't realize that's going to happen?
No, they
You're an
obviously
idiot.
did not study this thing very well, because we hear him kind of on a radio voiceover talking about, "Oh, the rain will wash it all away, it'll be fine," and then we go back to the cemetery and we see one lone skeleton pop up. So I'm like, "Where were you? How come you didn't pop up the first time around, guy?" But that's how we end freeze frame on the skeleton popping out. So I guess he missed the first round.
There's many sequels, isn't there? There's like, is there not like 5 sequels ultimately of
I
this?
think so, which
like
end up not being very good, I don't think. So, probably not
There's
worth
always
watching.
Gonna be more.
Yeah.
It was always
Yes,
gonna
because
be more, but
this
yes.
did really well. So, but yeah, just a
So it
really
should
kind
have
of
done.
yeah. So just a really kind of smart way to connect it to Night of the Living Dead, to build on the zombie lore, to, highlight, the punks in a positive way. Lots of fun things this movie's doing, great look for the zombies, a fun kind of cast of characters, this kind of funny, campy tone, but still kind of having some really great plot stuff in there. So
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed Return of the Living Dead.
Very much so. I think I said when we did cover Night of the Creeps to start the series that was my kind of zombie movie. It felt half silly and half serious, but great, great practical effects. And this just it took all those tonal elements and elevated them up to 11. This really didn't it, while actively connecting itself in in a slightly odd way, but a clever way to Night of the Living Dead specifically. Which is obviously, it will forever and always, I think, be the greatest of zombie movies. More so than Dawn of the Dead, admittedly. That's my personal opinion. I know Dawn has its favours. Certain people favour Dawn of the Dead over Night of. I'm always going to be a Night of over Dawn fan. I think,
and the remake is solid too.
Wonderful.
I
The
really
remake
like
of
the
Night of the
remake as
Living
well.
Dead, the Tony Todd one.
Yes,
It
one
is.
of few hero roles for Tony Todd. And they make Barbara badass. So
Yeah, I mean, Dawn of the Dead has a respected to a certain degree
Zack Snyder, the running
remake as well, doesn't
zombies,
it? Which does, yes. I mean, it's very early mid 2000s. Let's make zombies rapid speed style, isn't it? It comes from 28 Days Later, that, but there you go. We'll be getting into that next week, though, won't we? We'll be getting into rapid speed Infected next week in 28 years later, because I did miss that earlier this year when it did come out. So we're ending our Living Dead series with that, and I'm very excited. Actually, I've been led to believe great things, but also unusual things are to happen. In 28 years later.
There's an interesting setup for the next film at the end of this one. So
we'll yes, I've been told that. I do hope it's not as off-putting as some people seem to believe it to be. But it'll have to do a hell of a job for me to prefer it over Return of the Living Dead, to be honest with you, because this was truly my kind of zombie movie. I love the unnecessary gore of it. I love the craziness of it. But I love the cleverness of it as well, and the affection for its own genre that I think it does have, while being contentious to a degree and rebellious and defiant, I suppose, to a degree. I think it, it comes from everything in a clever way, in a smart way. And really succeeds in doing what it wants to do, I think, in the end, despite a bit of chaos along the way.
Yes, I mean, the cast, despite kind of being hard with that director, the cast ends up looking back on this film very fondly, so that's always nice to kind of see. Yeah.
It is. It is. But yes, well done, Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
Very much enjoyed that one. 28 years is coming next week, 28 years later, to close out our Living Dead series. Or here on Morgan Hasn't Seen, of course, it's not the only show we have on the It's a Wonderful podcast feed. The main show is still there every Friday, celebrating old movies. We say celebrating. We are celebrating to a certain degree in October on our Two Heads Are Better Than One series. Jeannine, we have the incredible two-headed transplant coming up this week. Bruce Dern as a mad scientist.
Yeah. Casey
Craziness
Kasem
going on there. Casey Kasem wearing a ridiculous
Casey Kasem's
wig.
toupee. So bad.
Who actually made Casey Kasem's toupee in that movie makes more of an impression than Casey Kasem does in that movie, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah.
He's not in the movie a great deal.
No.
For Bruce Dern's actively
the main guy. Yeah.
But that's very interesting. Certainly a great Two Heads movie on the main show. But of course, we have Diving into Doctor Who and Discovering Dawson's Creek alternating every Monday as well. Do subscribe to this podcast feed wherever you are listening today on all major platforms. Leave your comments on Spotify. Leave your ratings and reviews everywhere else. Subscribe and ding your notification bell on the It's a Wonderful Podcast YouTube channel, of course, if you are watching today's special video podcast episode for the month that did win the poll.
Yes.
Which is always very exciting. And if you would like to support us on Patreon or donate in any way, there are links in the description to do that. If you have been watching, things have been scrolling down at the bottom of the screen all episode long. You can, of course, also just find us on and across all the social medias on the app formerly known as Twitter and on Blue Sky at It's a Wonderful One. Find me on the app formerly known as Twitter at The Purple Dawn with the 3 instead of the E and the because, Jeannine.
3 is a magic number.
On Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky at The Purple Dawn. All your living dead is where.
You can find me at Jeannine __ on Twitter, Jeannine on Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. And if you want to get any merch for any of our shows, just check the description for the link or search G9 Design on tpublic.com.
It does, of course, leave only one thing left to do, Jeannine, and I think in true Return of the Living Dead, slimy, tarry zombie fashion, we must end in the appropriate brainy way. 3, 2, 1, break.